Hey Andre, I can see you, I can't hear you.
All right, everyone. Hello from sunny California. Hello, Samy.
From Dijon, France. Happy to be there. Thank you for organizing this event. Very glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to have you here, and I'm super excited to announce this new series of events which Games Round is going to conduct on a regular basis. So it's called Meet the Publisher, and on this event we're going to meet well-known publishers worldwide, and we're going to ask different questions and hopefully go through prototypes. And a part of our presentation today is your presentation, Hyper Casual Trends 2020. So tell me, how's your day going so far?
Pretty good until now, pretty busy as always, because hyper-casual is hyper-casual, so hundreds of things happening at the same time on the same day, but it's pretty exciting, and that's why I love this market, so all good until now.
Yeah, I know. Everything is changing, and this is something that you're going to tell us about, yeah, today. So, but before we jump to the presentation, let me tell everyone a couple of words about what Games Round is and what we're doing. Games Round is a platform which connects game developers with publishers and investors. I was a publisher myself back in the days, and I was scouting for new games and for new studios. And I visited GDC, and on GDC, I had more than 50 meetings with different developers, all great developers. But the thing is that before you even look at the game, you want to figure out what kind of game, what genre, what is the monetization they are developing for. And turned out, so I spent a lot of time on just introductions and asking all those basic questions. And I spent a lot of my time, and almost 90% of all those connections were useless. And don't get me wrong, these were great teams, but they were just not in our sweet spot. So I thought there should be something where I could go online and filter out the teams and the games which are in my sweet spot. For example, for Ketchapp, you're interested in mobile games, hyper casual, right? With very, preferably with metrics. And we will release this functionality soon, so we will have metrics on this platform. Some other publishers like Scopely or maybe Tiny Build, they want PC, premium, or mid stage, right? And here on Games Round, you can do that. And I can tell everyone that there's already more than 65 registered publishers on the platform. And to name the few, just like Scopely, Ketchup, and I mean, many publishers. And please feel free to take a look at our publisher section. But so this is, yeah, so this is basically a short introduction about who we are and what we do. And I would hand it over to Samy. So let me make a quick introduction. So Samy Guillemin is a third-party coordinator at Ketchapp. After 2 years working in the Ubisoft mobile games for brands such as Rayman, Assassin's Creed, South Park, and Hungry Shark, Samy joined the Ketchapp team as third-party coordinator 2 years ago, actually. In this position, Samy is dealing with business development questions, market analysis, editorial vision, and many other topics to make Ketchapp's relationship with external developers and studios better every day. So, Samy, handing it over to you.
Thanks again for this introduction, and yeah, let's jump into it. So so it looks like it's freezing a bit. Wait a sec, it should arrive. Yeah, so the goal of this presentation, is to let you know that hypercasual has been around for almost 6 years now. And of course, the market in 2020 is pretty different from what it was in 2014. So the goal of this presentation is to give you an overview of what the market has become and what are the main tips that you want to keep in mind if you want to succeed on this market nowadays. And so first, I want to start with a quick back to basics part. Yes, hypercasual is very volatile, and something which is true one day on this market might be totally wrong or outdated 1 month after. But there are a few golden rules that remain unchanged, and I want to make sure that you have them in mind. So this is what we call our three main pillars, and everything starts with the marketability. What you need to have in mind is that more than 2/3 of your players will discover your game via some advertising on the social medias. While they're scrolling, they will find a gameplay video of your game. This is how they will discover your game. So you need to catch their attention. You need to offer something unique enough to make them stop scrolling. Once you've got their attention, you want them to understand the game instantaneously. Whatever their origin, age, culture, anyone around the world should be able to get the game's goal in 2 seconds. And then once you've got their attention, when they've understood what they're seeing, your game needs to work as an invitation. They need to feel like they need to play this game. So this is very crucial and is directly linked to the business model of hypercasual. Then you have the snackability part. So the idea is to say that your game should be just like a snack, meaning that it should be simple, satisfying, and fast to consume. Here, basically anyone should be able to play it wherever they are, whatever they're doing. Remember that hypercasual is all about making your players happy and to avoid their frustration during the small boring moments of their daily lives while they're in the subway, while they're waiting for something. So yeah, that's the point here. And you have the freshness of your game, which is the final pillar. So here the idea is to say that it's directly linked to the two previous pillars, but the idea is to say that if you want to catch the player's attention, if you want to create a wow effect, you need to offer something pretty unique, something that will generate a feel, which will avoid the deja vu feeling, and that will be pretty different from what the players feel that he might already have played before. But being original and innovative doesn't mean that you have to avoid all the hyper-casual codes, because of course the market has been here for 6 years, as I told you. And there are a few codes, a few things that are now almost musts that players have been enjoying for a while, and you can't arrive with a game nowadays which wouldn't be level-based, for example, or without 3D visuals. Well, we can discuss this point, but 3D visuals tend to be way more appealing to the mass audience than 2D games these days. The light pastel colors, neutral characters and settings, all these kind of things are codes that you need to keep in mind to push a successful game nowadays. Just to come back quickly on the simple part of your game, the simplicity. Why does it matter to make simple games in hypercasual? Well, first because anyone from grandmother to children should be able to play it, but also because on this market, churn rate and difficulty are strongly correlated. As you can see on this graph, you have in blue the users who didn't complete one level because they failed most of the time. And in red, the users who churned, so who never came back after they lose in the game. And you can see that it's directly correlated. So basically, if you frustrate a player by offering him an experience which is too difficult, you lose him. That's almost that simple. But to go a bit further, so these were the three main pillars. We can expand a bit, what the players really want in 2020. And a first thing that you need to make sure is that your game offers enough depth, that its core gameplay is interesting enough to keep players engaged on the long run without having to create too much new content. So yeah, depth is definitely the universal key if you want great in-game KPIs. On the retention and playtime side, it's definitely the game changer. You need to what it means to have a deep gameplay is that you need to give the players the opportunity to choose their own in-game approach. If to face one situation and with just one controller, they should be able to decide how they want to play. Should they select a risky approach if they are like traditional gamers with a lot of experience of difficult games looking for challenge, or if it's just a child who doesn't who just wants a simple, very simple experience, he should be able to take a quieter approach of the level. And so for that, it's of course directly linked to your in-game mechanics and to the controls you offer. For example, a tap timing mechanic, even if it's really simple to get, might not offer enough depth because it can become pretty quickly pretty repetitive. Whereas drawing mechanics, for example, offers much more freedom to the players and are thus way deeper by nature, I would say. Then you need to think about the content scalability of your game. Everything starts in hypercasual, as you know, with a minimum viable product, a very raw and quick to develop part of your game. And yeah, the first step is to test it as fast as possible on the market. But having this MVP doesn't prevent you from thinking of what you will bring later in the game. From the very beginning of the project, you should already have in mind a few things, a few features that you could add to the game to make it better. It's very important, and for example, variety is one of the key things if you want to keep the players engaged on the long run. To have different types of environments, of enemies, of power-ups, it definitely makes the difference on the retention side. But you need to keep in mind that adding this type of content will require much development time. And so, yeah, that's something you want to keep in mind. And that's why depth is important, because you don't need to have that much variety if your gameplay is deep enough. And you need to think of the meta game, so everything which is not related directly to your core gameplay. So to reward the players, to encourage them to continue, to offer them some progression feeling. There are many tools on that side that might be useful. For a very long time, and at the beginning of the hypercasual, the only progression feature that was implemented in the game was the leaderboard, where you could see the highest score of the players. It wouldn't be enough in 2020, so you need to have progressively unlockable skins, objects. In some games, we see more and more some sort of idle cities where you can gather some resources and build some things to keep a track of what you've achieved in the game and to give a better horizon for the players. So it's really important too. And finally, you have the visual polish. So for quite a long time, and at the beginning of the hypercasual, it was the case, you didn't really need to have that much of a polished game, visually speaking, to top the charts. But the increasingly high competition and the increasingly high quality of the games released have brought the players to have higher expectations. And so, yeah, they are now used to high quality games visually. And as a consequence, well, visual now impacts way more the CPI than they used to in the past. And it's especially true with all the ASMR style games where you have very polished visuals, because it's the key of the experience to have something which is visually very satisfying. Then, as you may know, hypercasual is a very data-driven market. So on this market, you want to make sure that you focus as a developer on the right KPIs, on the right things. And so, well, to put it simply, the hypercasual business model can be summed up by a typical CPI versus LTV fight. And so the question is, well, how much does it cost me to acquire a player, to convince a player to install my game, versus how much will that player generate once he's in the game? And so, since hypercasual is mainly ad-based in terms of economy, the question here is how long will the player keep on playing? First during one day, but also on the long run. So playtime and retention are crucial. And on this time period, what will be how will I monetize him? So what will be the ad frequency? How many rewarded videos will I be able to push to show him? But in the end, yeah, the CPI is really the key metric in the hypercasual, because one CPI, 1 cent of CPI saved is 1 cent of profitability, and thus it's yeah, the basic, and that's why we want to test the CPI as fast as possible. So that's it for the first part on the fundamentals. Now the idea is to jump on the core of this presentation to give you a better understanding of the market evolution. And first, to start with a very macro trend, it's interesting to see that the market is actually splitting into directions. Hyper-casual is splitting in two directions. On one side, you have ultra-casual games, which are even more hyper-casual than typical hyper-casual games. Almost semi-contemplative experience, like interactive videos. You have a lot of ASMR games, simulation games, which are on this segment. And on the other side, you have what we call deep hyper-casual games, where you have, on the contrary, maybe games that are targeting a smaller audience, but with the more retention and monetization tools. So this is the current split that we're seeing. To put it very simple, ultra-casual benefit from extremely low CPI, but usually struggle a bit on the long-term retention, while deep hyper-casual games benefit from higher retention, but also higher CPIs. But it is, of course, just a very macro approach of the market segmentation, and we can also better understand the market by analyzing a bit its genres and subgenres. So just one thing I want to make really clear from the beginning is that hypercasual is an approach. It's a business model. And thus, in theory, any mobile game genre could be hypercasualized. However, and if you keep track of all the game released over the last 6 years, you can see that the huge majority of the games released can be regrouped under 6 main genres. You have the runners, so basically going from point A to point B while dealing with some obstacles on your way. You have .io games, which are sort of competitive games against bots in closed arena. You have aim games, where your goal is to aim and shoot at different targets. You have simulation games, reproducing real-life activities like ASMR, ISMR, DIY, or just random real-life activities. Light puzzles, which are puzzle games, hyper-casualized, so playable and enjoyable for everyone across the world, whatever the origin again, and whatever the age, the culture. And you have light idle. It's a bit apart from all the other genres, but it's the hyper-casual version of idle games, basically. And that's the only segment that we won't discuss today, as we're not especially the specialist on that side. But our colleagues at Green Panda Games definitely are, so feel free to reach out to them if you're into light idle games. This quick segmentation allows us to check a bit to have a good overview of what happened on the markets over the last past month. And as you can see with this graph, which shows the evolution by download month after month of each genre, you can see that hypercasual is extremely volatile. So we all know and love hypercasual for its trend-based DNA, but as you can see, it's definitely something that we can see in numbers. In less than 1 year, there are 3 different genres which became the most popular ones, and with the up and downs, let's say, that are quite visible. As you can see, runners and light puzzles remain, so in red and blue, remain the 2 main safe bets, because they were here since the beginning of the market and they keep renewing themselves. And the other striking thing on this graph is to see the rise of simulation game, genre which almost wasn't existing in last September, and which is now one of the most trendy one. So it's something which is really interesting too. And now that we have this global picture, let's focus a bit on each genre. And first, let's start with the runners. So runners are basically the most exploited games since the creation of hypercasual. And so it remains a very safe bet for the players, because it's really straight to the point. In a video of a runner, it's really easy to understand that you're moving forward, aiming for the arrival of the track. It's really something that makes sense in the player's mind. But what is interesting to see is that the market evolved a lot between the beginning of a hyper-casual, where you had 2D games, infinite runners with very minimalistic visuals. Um, it's definitely not possible anymore in 2020. And as you can see with the 3 references of very successful runners published lately, you can see that it really matters to offer something fresh in terms of storytelling. For example, the 3 games that you see offer each a unique and universally understandable, again, storytelling. For example, in Master Thief, everyone knows the cops and robbers game. It's a code, that something, a cultural code that everyone has. Then the depth of this game is really crucial too. So, for example, in Master Thief, again, you can choose between different approach. If you want to move quietly without being spotted by the guards to steal the piece of art, or if you want to run and as fast as possible, and so it's more risky, of course, because the guards are alerted quicker. But it's more challenging too. So for more experienced players, it might be interesting. Also, on the parkour run game, it's really interesting to see that the joystick control gives you a lot of freedom. So you can definitely completely choose your approach in the level, and so it's a great example of depth too. So keep this in mind if you want a runner to be successful in 2020. Fresh storytelling, depth, and risk-reward mechanics are almost musts. Then I will be quick on this one because .io games are almost non-existing these days. At least they do not know a lot of success recently. There was a golden age of .io games in 2018. Basically, the Pandora box was opened by a big publisher, and every developer, every publisher tried to push a successful .io game. The problem is that nobody really succeeded in renewing the formula, and in the end, the subgenres didn't know how to reinvent itself. The gameplay mechanics remain quite similar, and so in the end, the players got bored of this kind of games, and it had, of course, a direct impact on the CPIs, on the global CPIs, because they all exploded. It doesn't mean one sec. It doesn't mean that .io game didn't influence the whole industry, and on the contrary, especially it influenced the runners, because since 2018, the idea of implementing bots enemies, so fake competitions, in runners, for example, is extremely successful. So it still brought something to the industry. Then you have light puzzles, probably the genre where you can be the most creative. So again, the light puzzle genre has been here since the very beginning of the industry, and it remains extremely popular because, just like runners, puzzle games very well knew how to renew themselves. So it's really cool on that side. It's really striking to see that nowadays, in 2020, a successful light puzzle is all about rewarding the players. You need to make the players feel smart and rewarded at each step of the game, really. And on that side, of course, adding a very good storytelling to let the player understand better what he's going to do, and to make him feel proud of what he's achieved during the game is really important. But also visual juiciness, visual rewards, it's really important too in these kind of games. The typical problem in light puzzles is more about the long-term retention, because on the CPI side, it's usually pretty successful because the gameplay, a problem that you have to solve, which is kind of triggering your brain. You really want to solve that problem. It does performs quite well in CPIs, but to keep players engaged in the long run, you usually have to create quite a lot of content, a lot of variety in terms of level design or gameplay elements. And so in the end, it's what you have to keep in mind when you create light puzzles. It's that, well, finding a deep and really satisfying core gameplay is important if you don't want to spend too much time on improving and adding some content. Then you have the simulation games. As I told you 9 months ago, it wasn't even existing. The simulation genre was not exploited in hypercasual, and now it's exploding. So the question is to see if it will continue to grow or not. We can see that the genre is slowing down a bit because maybe, like for the .io games, well, all the possible settings will be achieved probably. That's something that we'll have to monitor to see if the genre succeed in renewing itself. But yeah, we can see that all the viral videos, like for Slap Kings, the contest of slaps that was very viral on TikTok, all the ASMR videos that are doing great on social networks, all these kind of things are great inspiration on that side. But here again, the question is the long-term retention. It might be a bit tricky to get a long-term retention. So yeah, that's something you have to keep in mind too. And finally, the aim games. It's probably the less hypercasual by nature genre of hypercasual, because by definition, aiming requires some skills, some timing notions, or both, and it's usually makes these games a bit less accessible to the wide audience because they are more demanding. And yeah, a second point which is important too is that very often these games choose a shooter approach with guns and bullets, and so very often these kind of games and settings are more appealing to a male audience. And having just a male audience, of course, is a problem in hypercasual, because your goal is to get the broadest possible audience, so ideally a 50-50 gender split. But on the other side, these games are by nature great candidates for a deep hypercasual approach. So you sacrifice a part of your audience, but on the other side, you can make these games more engaging by targeting a bit more core players. So you can compensate this smaller audience by more advanced monetization and meta features, for example. And what we can see is that definitely these games, we can see many successful aim games these days out there in the stores. And very quickly, finally, because it's a recurring and very interesting topic in hypercasual, everything is a question of trends in hypercasual. So what is trendy one day can be outdated the other day. And as a developer, I think that it's really important that you ask yourself the good questions when you face a new trends that you see in the charts. You need to always question the origin of the trend. Is it really something that the players are looking for, or is it just something artificially created by a publisher running, I don't know, a game jam on a specific theme, for example? Then you need to question the maturity of the trend before you jump on the trend and try to create your own game based on this trend. You want to make sure to know if this game, this trend is already too mature with many games in the top charts. In that case, it's already probably saturated, or if it's only in the testing phase, if your competitors are in the testing phase, or if you're alone, or if you're creating that trend. That's something that you also need to question before you go. And the most important one is, does your game, your ID, does it enrich the trend? Will you bring something new to it? I think it's definitely the key, because if you don't bring anything new, any added value, any new gameplay mechanic, any new twist, you won't be successful. So that's it for the main for this presentation. Andre, maybe if you want to jump to the prototype review.
Thank you, Samy. It was very, very interesting. And I have a couple of questions about what you just showed us.
Sure.
Can you go back on a slide with CPI?
Sure, definitely.
Please.
So one sec. My computer is a bit laggy.
It's okay.
It's quite... You should see it in a few seconds.
So there was a question in the chat in YouTube. What is the RV divided
Per
by DAO?
All right, so RV by DIU, it's basically the number of rewarded videos divided by the daily active users. So basically, the idea is how much rewarded videos can you show to a player one day, and so rewarded videos are, if you in case some of you don't know, are it's the most interesting ad format in hyper casual games because players actually choose to watch them. You give a reward to the player after they've watched a gameplay video. It can be a score multiplier, it can be the opportunity to open a chest, to win a skin. There are many levers on that side to make the ads more appealing to the player and not to impose them with the bad timing, to impose them to the players, because imposing an ad, so interstitial format, is more frustrating for the players.
Thank you. Thank you. Quick technical question. CPI less than 30 cents. What should be the market? What should be the target audience? Is it unique and unified across all publishers? How they measure CPI?
No, definitely not. So for all these KPIs, it's the KPIs that we are looking for at Ketchapp in general. One very important thing to keep in mind is that it's not, well, we can adapt ourselves. Basically, that's the KPIs under which we find the prototype interesting. Of course, the lower the CPI, the more promising the game will be. 30 cents is usually the bar where we know that we can achieve a strong LTV that is strong enough to compensate it. But of course, we are aiming at, for real hit games, we are aiming at even lower CPIs. So yeah, and for the targeting, keep in mind that hyper casual is all about seducing the broadest possible audience.
Yeah.
So we target pretty much everyone, and that's the real hit potential comes from a low CPI on the broadest possible audience, because it means that your game has the necessary mass appeal to bring a lot of people to your game.
Got it. What about the market where you should test it? Because obviously CPI in the United States is different from CPI in some other country.
Yeah. So definitely I should indeed, it's a nice question. We should specify that the main market in hyper casual is the US one, and so it's the one where all the games are tested, and I think it remains true for most of the big publishers out there, since it's the most profitable market, since it's the one where we have all the data. We test on that market to have benchmark basically and to know what we want. But indeed, a CPI under 30 cents in the US will probably be way lower in for example in India, or so yeah, that's definitely something that you also need to have in mind. But the LTV will be also way smaller in countries where CPI tend to be lower. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. The reason why I'm asking is that we will going to add this functionality, add metrics to games, and we want to make sure that people are putting down very specific CPI, because you can write 0.1 cent, right? But it will be tested on not in the United States, but in a different audience.
Yeah, definitely.
I have another question about what is the weight of metrics in game evaluation by publisher versus evaluation of an art, core gameplay, this kind of stuff? Because like sometimes I heard a lot of times basically that metrics is more important. Some people say that we don't even look at the game almost, we look only to metrics. So we trust metrics because now the world is going crazy and you never know what people will play. So if there are no metrics, I'm not going to even look at the game, right? I need metrics to make the judgment. What's your take on that?
Well, you pretty much answered the questions the question you asked. Indeed, testing is the first essential step uh, because we need to have metrics, because you can't guess even with a lot of experience and on such a volatile market, you can't know for sure what players will enjoy or not, and so you need to have a feedback from players, as this is the most secured way to be sure of the game's potential. So indeed, we want to have KPIs as soon as possible on one game to be sure of its potential, or on the contrary, well, if it doesn't have any. But all the publishers out there, and Ketchapp too, of course, are here to test the games with the developers we are partnering with. So very often there is a first, let's say, editorial review of the game to see if the game is interesting enough to be tested or not, because we still have some, even if they, of course, we can be surprised, but in general, if the game doesn't complete the key pillars I mentioned in the presentation, or if the game is in landscape, or if the game is too dark, we know by experience, and because we tested so many games before, that they probably will perform quite poorly. So in this kind of cases, we give some preliminary feedbacks to the developers to fix this kind of critical issues before we test the game, to be quicker after the test and more reactive, to focus on the right points.
Got it. Got it. If you go to, thank you for the answer. Can you please go to the trend slide where with lines with the chart?
Yeah, sure.
So it seems that trends are changing so fast that it's really hard to follow it. So you can start developing something in 1 month, and it will be outdated in the next month. And the second question here, so yeah, the first question is how to keep up with the trend. Where to get this information? Is it only through a publisher, or you can try to follow the market? So question one, and question two here, connected with question one, is sometimes developers have a passion to certain genre, passion, or they know how to do certain things, but it's not in the trend according to this slide, for example. Uh, do they have, or what do you think? Yeah, should they follow the trend in order to have a higher probability to develop a good hit and be noticed by the audience and by publishers?
So two questions, two very interesting ones. First, indeed, the market is changing very fast. It's a kind of classic, let's say, offer and demand law. Basically, at a certain point, when a genre is not exploited or doesn't know any success, or it's probably well, so yeah, you should probably take the question on the opposite side, because as I told you in this presentation, being offering something new, something which is innovative at the moment where you release it, is really the key. And so for that, it's probably more interesting to be trend setter, so to take a risk and to go to create something entirely new. For example, in your second question, if a developer is really good at creating something in a specific genre, it's probably more interesting for him to focus on this part, and to test it at least once to see how players react, for example. So yeah, being trendsetter instead of being trend follower can definitely be an option. The thing is, and that's what I mentioned in the last slide, when I want you to question the maturity of the trend. Basically, you want to know if you're at the beginning of the explosion of the simulation genre, or if you're at the peak of the market. On this side, indeed, the advices of publishers definitely help, because they have the overview of the global market. But there are also, I would say, ways for solo developers to keep an eye on it, or for small studios to keep an eye on it. For example, there's a very cool Instagram account which is called Store Glide. I definitely encourage you to follow them, where they feature the most interesting games in soft launch for them at the moment. And so each day, almost, you have a new post with the games, the interesting games they've spotted. It's keeping an eye on this can be a good way for you to well, find good ideas, to exploit them further, to find the right twist. So yeah.
Got it. Thank you for the answer. Thank you for that. We got a couple of questions from Dory. So this was released. This Dory questionnaire released prior to our virtual event, and I will read just a few of them. Should MVP present meta gameplay or only core gameplay?
So very good question. On our side, and it's the overall philosophy of the market. You need to test only the core gameplay of your game, because as soon as you have it ready, you can know how player will behave in the game, and it's already a good indicator. The the biggest part of your KPIs will be decided by your core gameplay and its quality. So metagame only influence a bit the game, but a game with a very crappy retention, for example, or with a very high CPI, it would make no sense to spend more time on creating meta features that wouldn't be used by the players in the end. So yeah, if you have a strong core gameplay and a strong MVP without any meta features, you should already have very promising KPIs.
Got it. Another question. What do you think of CTR tests?
Very interesting question too. CDR tests. So for people who might not know what it is, CTR tests are so click-through rate tests where you just push a video of one game without having the game ready, and you see how people click or not on your video. So it's very interesting for two reasons. First, it allows you to cheat a bit and maybe to not develop the entire game, just to have enough content for one quick 30-sec video. And then you see how players react. It gives you a good overview of what might be the CPI later. And it's also a way to postpone the time where you will need to put your game live on the App Store. And well, it's also a good way to avoid to be copycatted by some competitors or by some other studios, to keep your game in the shadow as long as you can. So these are the two main interesting points of the CTR tests. On the other side, well, CTR tests aren't completely, let's say, secure. Just because you have a very good CTR doesn't mean that you will have a very low CPI, because CTR is only one of the many components of what makes a good CPI. So it's a good indication, but you cannot only trust it. And the other point, the other negative point, is that if you have a very good CTR, but you only developed a small part of your game, you still have to complete all the rest of your game. And so you still have many things to develop. Competitors might have seen that CTR test in between, and so you might arrive a bit late since you have to catch up on the development of the real prototype. So yeah, it's quite, I think we should remain quite cautious about it on our side, even if we can definitely CTR test your game if that's what you want to do. But we usually prefer to have, well, at least a real CPI and, if possible, a good indication of the D1 retention.
Got it.
But again, we can be flexible on that side.
We've got much more questions in Dory, but I think that we're out of time for the question part.
All right.
So let's jump right into the prototype commenting, and
Sure.
if we have some other time, we'll come back to the questions.
All right. So we've selected a few prototypes among the many that were submitted that we thought were promising or interesting for some features they had. The idea is to give you some feedbacks on them. And here is the first one, Dirty Bird. So I will play a bit the gameplay video. So basically, you're a bird. You poop on people coming under you. I think that really the positive aspect of this game is that, well, the setting is extremely fun and it's extremely universal. Everyone on Earth know that it's risky to cross the path of a pigeon. You don't want to walk under them. So yeah, it's I mean it definitely creates the wow and funny effect that you expect from a good hyper casual game. It's also quite fresh and innovative. That's not something that we've seen a lot on the market. Actually, it's the first time we see something similar. So really interesting on that side. I think the game is pretty interesting for the marketability, its marketability in general. But on the other side, I think that the problem here, the main problem would be the lack of depth and variety of the gameplay. So basically, pretty quickly, the game will become quite repetitive because all you do is going left or right on this bar. So I think that players might get bored quite quickly, and you would like to. I think it could be very interesting to keep that storytelling element of the pooping bird, but to put it to adapt it to a more a deeper gameplay, a deeper game ID. I think it would make sense. And also visually, we have this squarish approach in hyper casual. According to our tests, it's not the most appealing one because it's not that neutral. There is a clear artistic choice here, and when you do a clear artistic choice, basically you take the risk to let a part of your audience, your potential audience, on the side of the road. So yeah, that's my main comment for this one. The idea is great, but I think that gameplay wise, we should probably focus on something else. Second one, Chroma Dash. So it's a quite juicy and colorful runner. As I mentioned in my presentation, so in terms of visuals, the colors are really appealing. The developer used these, let's say, beach, sea storytelling background, which is really trendy. It's actually one of the most one of the trendiest one in the industry in terms of CPI. It's one of the players' favorite environments. So very appealing visually, but it probably lacks a bit of freshness, meaning that this kind of typical runners where you control a ball have already been seen a lot. It could have probably been quite successful a few years ago, but I guess that these kind of games have been seen too much to really create that wow effect that we are looking for. And yeah, the ball characters is probably too abstract for nowadays players. From what we see again from our tests, one of the main criteria of the marketability now is the relatability of of the setting of your game. If the player can identify himself to what he's seeing on screen, you have more chances to make him download the game. That's why all these DIY ASMR simulation games are so trendy at the moment, because players can rely to the situation. And basically, it's more it's more complex to identify yourself as a ball than to a character, for example. So that's it for Chroma Dash, but congrats again on the visual aspect of the game. Then we have Mr. Jumping Max, which is a jumpy runner. Again, visually, it's really clean. The animation, the small wobble of the platforms that you're jumping on is really clean. You have a good diversity of obstacles, of elements. Sorry, my mouse is is bugging. I can't control it anymore. Hopefully, I will get get it back in control in a few sec. But yeah, as you can see, you have a lot of variety in the game. The water, as you can see here, is extremely executed. So overall, a great quality game. Again, I think that there's, as for the previous prototypes, a problem probably on the visual side with the squarish kind of voxel visual approach that is not the trendiest one at the moment. And also on the freshness side, so the gameplay remains something that we've seen quite a lot already. So it might be a problem if you want to catch your players' attention and to get low CPI. Okay, I got my mouse back. Then you have Sherminator, which is not really hyper-casual, but I think that its core mechanic definitely could be the base of a great hyper-casual game. So first, as you can see, it starts with a level selector. It's definitely something you want to avoid in hyper-casual. Basically, players should be one click away from being able to play a game. You should avoid to have too many menus and level selection before the player starts. This is something you want to make sure that you avoid in your games. But yeah, here the controls again. So where you have this kind of multiple dash, probably a bit complex for hyper casual, but it offers quite a lot of depth and a lot of opportunities to play to play your game, to approach your game. So of course here the landscape mode doesn't really fit hyper casual either, but and actually I've seen recently a few prototypes based on similar gameplay mechanics, and I think it's really interesting. The 2D aspect of the game might also be a problem, as well as the how could I say? Yeah, the kind of square cartoonish visual look, which is reminding us a bit of well, platform games like Mario or stuff like that. It's something that could also it could be not neutral enough to be appealing for the broadest audience. Then you have Smash M Mayhem. So on this one, I think the gameplay is really great. In a general way, gameplays that are based on physics-based, well, what gameplays physics-based are usually very appreciated by our players. So it's a very cool and dynamic aim game. The main problem is that the game is so cool that it actually already exists. It's a game called Knock 'em All, I think, published by Voodoo a few months ago now. So it's really the same core mechanic, but and so if you want to appeal to a 50-50 gender split, basically you need to make sure that your game will be colorful enough, will offer light pastel colors. It's something you really want to make sure. And here, having first a shooter, which is more appealing for male players in general, and very dark colors, is probably an obstacle to low CPI. And also, since there's already a hit game published on this type of game, I think it's, well, the market probably already is saturated, and it's probably too risky to go now with a similar ID, because there's not enough differentiating. There are not enough differentiating point between those two games. But congrats for the mechanic. Then we have Goldwagen. So a very good-looking runner where you need to choose on what rail you want to move forward and to avoid a different kind of obstacles. Here again, great job on the variety. You have many different environments, different obstacles, different moving roads. I think that here the main problem might be also a question of freshness. It's really linked to what I said on runners in 2020. If you want to be successful, you want to add a twist to your game. You want to add maybe a secondary mechanic that will make your game feel unique enough. So yeah, that's probably something that lacks a bit in this prototype. But otherwise, it's really well executed. Next, we have Eliminators. So it's basically Gang Beast, but a mobile version, I would say. here I think that I selected this game because it's really interesting. The ideation process behind this game is really interesting. Reproducing, trying to adapt a mechanic of a very famous game, successful game on other platforms, on other supports, to try to adapt and to hyper casualize this idea to simplify the inputs is definitely a good way to find good ideas, fresh ideas. Uh, for example, one of the best inspiration sources during the past years for hyper-casual games have been Mario Party little games, mini games. The main problem here is that first, well, the game is a .io game, so not that trendy at the moment. The CPI tend to remain quite high for that genre, and also definitely visually, in terms of visual polish, it's not really at the level of what players are looking for. Unfortunately, these kind of dark gray backgrounds are definitely not polished enough to be tested. You would probably get quite crappy results, and also I think that Gang Beasts already has been hyper casualized with success a few maybe months ago. I don't have the name of the game, but I think that it already exists. So again, there's probably a risk of saturation on that side. For Adventure Run 3D, I think that what's interesting here is the overall approach of trying to offer a sort of hyper casual tempo run, basically. It's interesting, but and the visual approach of the game definitely makes sense. It's definitely in line with what we can see on the market. But I would say that in terms of polish, in terms of physics, there are some weird behavior that might be the game might not be juicy, polished enough to achieve great results, and especially yeah, probably not original enough because again, runner with it lacks a sort of additional mechanic to make it more interesting to the players. And last game, so for this one, we don't have a video, we only have screenshots, but I thought it was kind of interesting. From what I understand, it's kind of 3D sort of Flappy Bird version. I think there's a nice work on the colors and shapes. It remains quite easily readable in spite of all the well, of the simplicity of the game. I would say that it's probably a bit too dark on the visual side, and also that well, the cube as character could probably not work these days. But yeah, I thought that the approach of turning a classic 2D game into a 3D game, it's also something that definitely makes sense. It's also a big trend on hyper casual games. So if you have some great 2D classics that you have in mind, thinking of ways to turn them in 3D definitely makes sense. And that's it for the prototypes. I hope it was useful for all the developers who submitted these games. Maybe I don't know if we still have time for some questions.
Yeah, we still do. Thanks, Samy. I think it was very helpful and very insightful because a lot of developers are asking questions. At at what point do I have to submit my game to a publisher? And it seems to me that you gave quite an answer that it has to be pretty close, like to finish at least. Like colors should be better, mechanics should be polished a little bit, right? So we are not talking about the release version of the game. However, we need to have a product which can be marketed to have a test CPI.
Yeah.
Or do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, definitely. You're right. What you need to have for a first test is even if the game is visually not as polished as you would like it to be for the worldwide release, you need indeed to offer something which is clean enough to look like a finished game, I would say. So indeed, that's really important. And on the other side, what you can do, and if you want to save some time, it's more on the content side. You don't have to create that much in-game content. You can just create a few levels to see how the gameplay is appealing. But yeah, visually, players' expectations, well, tend to force us to test more polished games than what we did before.
Yeah. we've got comments from YouTube. It is great to have someone who knows what he's talking about, give genuine reviews, which we can all take on board.
Well,
Uh,
happy to help.
and color issue was big eye opener. Thank you for that. Yeah, so we've got a couple more minutes, and probably we should continue. Let's finish with the prototype. So we announced that we will have a prize, an hour session with you, Samy, to the winner. So are you ready to announce who shall it be, or you need some time to think?
No, no, no. Definitely, it's clear on my side. It's again because of all the arguments I shared before. To me, the most interesting prototypes would be Dirty Bird, at least to test the concept because of its potential viral potential. To know if it's worthy or not to change the gameplay, to iterate on it. I think it would make sense to discuss it to discuss this game with the developer and with the studio.
Congrats, guys. All right, so let's take one more question from Dory. Yeah, this was actually answered. How advanced should be a prototype before submitting it to a publisher? I think we've covered that. Um, what is better for hyper casual, vertical or horizontal? I think you mentioned it real quick, but just to make sure that everyone is clear on that, it is.
Yeah, vertical without a doubt,
Yeah,
because players need to be able to play with just one hand while they're in the subway,
yeah,
while they're so yeah,
yeah.
basically you want them to play anywhere. Portrait mode is definitely the must for that.
How to check the game trends in market?
So as I said, I think that a great tool would be the Store Glide
Okay.
Instagram page. I think that if you don't have too much time to see what's live on the market at the moment, basically these guys are doing a great job and they do it for you. So you should definitely follow them.
Got it. Another question comes from YouTube. Um, am I supposed to publish my game in soft launch on my account before I apply to you?
What you can do, and it's true with all the publishers, is you on our websites you have a form where you can submit your game. So you can put a video of gameplay here. If we think that the game has potential, we'll definitely get back to you to test it. And here we can discuss the soft launch guidelines and how we are supposed to test it. One thing is sure is that if you're confident in your gameplay in your game's quality, you maybe want to keep it away from the stores to avoid being copycatted and to keep your ID safe, I would say.
Got it. Got it. Cool. I think we're out of time right now. And Semi, hey, this was super insightful session. I really thank you so much on behalf of everyone who was on the stream right now, because we've got many people watching us on YouTube and Facebook. Um, hey guys, this is going to be a regular event, and please feel free to check our posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, like basically all the network, Discord. You can find all the links in our on our page, gamesround.com, and obviously feel free to submit your prototypes. We've got people who can help you, and Sami is definitely one of the best people out there to give you comments on whatever you have actually. So this is how it worked for those 10 people, those 10 games. But I'm sure that he'll be happy to help you out further down the line.
Definitely.
All right, thanks, Sami, and see you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Andre.
All
Bye,
right,
everyone. It was a pleasure.
thank you, guys. Bye bye. Take care.